This is the Stalman Podcast, where I usually chat with creative professionals about photography, filmmaking, and tech, but sometimes I just want to talk about something without shooting any B-roll. And today, I want to follow up on my Canon R6 review. And if you didn't already watch my review, don't worry, you don't have to. I'll explain everything here so you don't have to go to the main channel, although, of course, it'll be a little more cinematic than this. At this point, I had to give back my R6 review unit, and thank you so much to Jordan Drake for lending it to me. So these are just props. This is the R and the 5D. These are the Canons that are left, and then the C200 that I'm shooting on now. So after spending that time with the R6, a lot has developed. Things were moving very quickly. I released that video the day before the Sony a7S III was announced. And I think we've basically ended up in the most confusing but amazing year of camera releases ever. I mean, if NAB had happened, like this was the NAB we were all hoping for, where they'd blow the doors off and just announce every amazing thing we've been waiting for. A 12K Blackmagic camera, an 8K Canon mirrorless camera, and just even good mirrorless from Canon, because they hadn't really got there yet. And then, of course, the a7S III sequel that we've been waiting 5 years for. Traditionally, Sony was releasing them quickly. Long wait on this one. Anyway, I mean, it all came at once. Not to mention some of the best lights ever. I mean, Aperture's Nova series, like there's so much good stuff coming out, but it's coming so fast and furious that it's kind of hard to keep track of it all and hard to know what to even follow. So anyway, all I want to do here is straighten out some of the thoughts about the Canon R6 and a little bit about the R5, although I haven't used one yet. I'm just watching everybody else's reviews, just like you. So let's cut to the chase. The biggest thing, the biggest component of the Canon story has been the overheating. And while I was testing mine, I mentioned towards the end of the video that after filming, I'd started to experience a little bit of overheating, but not very much. What was happening to me, again, was that at the end of the day, after I was done shooting, and I wasn't using the camera, so it shouldn't have been hot, I'd turn it back on and notice I'd only have about 10 minutes of record time. That's not even supposed to happen. So I was wondering if it was the ambient temperature of the room or whatever, but I didn't overheat the camera while I was shooting. So to me, it wasn't a bad experience. It didn't have any real effects. But now a whole bunch of YouTubers have done real world tests, and the verdict is in: this camera overheats. And I'm very sorry to say this is not a great video camera. And I actually have a very similar feeling about this as to what Gerald Undone, he just put out his full review of both of them, and it was exactly on the same lines that I was thinking. The big problem here isn't that these are bad cameras at all. It's that they were marketed completely incorrectly. A lot of the focus was on these breakthrough video features. So on the R5, that was 8K raw video, which is a crazy spec. And then on the R6, it was the oversampled 4K. Well, like I said before, the R6 marketing was just fumbled because it's an amazing camera and they didn't push it hard enough. But anyway, yes, these cameras for sure overheat in video modes. I got a lot of questions in though about if there were problems when you're doing photography. Does it ever overheat just shooting stills? And the answer is no. From everybody else's tests and my experiences, you will never be prevented from shooting a photo unless maybe you were shooting like 8K or the 4K oversampled and you already overheated the camera. And in that case, everything will be locked up, but you'll never get to that overheating point by just shooting stills. So this is the really important part of the follow-up. And this is kind of the final review, even though, I mean, I don't own this. There should be final reviews should come years down the road. But anyway, my current final review is that these are amazing photography cameras. Like these would be my choices for stills, period. This is what I've been asking for from Canon. I mean, these are my workhorse still cameras right now. We use these for everything. The 5D4, which even though the body, like I prefer this body over the R gets picked up more often lately. A lot of it's because of face tracking and honestly a flip screen. Those things go a very long way, are an incredibly practical feature set that once you're used to it, it's hard to go back. And then also the size, it's a little bit smaller. And living with these, they are both constrained a lot in terms of video. What I liked about them, and still like, is that they're very easy to make look good. The log profile grades very quickly and simply without it looking weird, which is something I would run into in the higher dynamic range profiles on the Sonys. But that's a whole different story. I'll make more videos about that in the future. But you could only shoot with an extreme 4K crop on the 5D and a medium 4K crop on the R. That kind of sucks. Like you can't use it in the same way as a Sony. So they were really supplementary cameras to me. I mean, I'm very glad that we've got the C200 now. That's what I consider like our real video camera. And these are always for B-roll or travel or extra footage. But they're not as good. They don't compete with the bigger camera. So what I had hoped for with the R6 was that it could just be my everything hybrid camera. Like it'd be my primary stills camera, which I'm still thinking about it for. It would be the best option available for that. And then it could also be a great B-roll camera and replace either of these or both of these. I just keep probably the R as a backup. But now I'm not so sure. The overheating is a real problem, and there's certain times that, let's say I'd be traveling and I can only bring the small camera, and I can't only bring a camera that will reliably overheat. That's a problem. So what should you do with this information? Because, we all shoot very differently. And I see a lot of very confused people in the comments. People get so aggressive and defensive about their brands and their specific cameras because I think they're not really acknowledging how completely different a lot of our situations are. So if you are in the situation of just being a stills photographer, that is your job, you can just confidently go out and buy the R6 or the R5, depending on your needs, and you will be very happy. The R6 is nearly just a small replacement for the 1DX Mark III, which is Canon's flagship, top-of-the-line professional camera. It's got the same sensor, very similar performance in most aspects. It's amazing and for a great price, and it's fast, and I love the R6. And then the R5, of course, if you need the extra megapixels, it's all there. Plus, it's just as fast somehow as the R6. I mean, they're amazing. They are incredible stills camera, and we're very lucky to have them. Now, if you're a hybrid shooter, which is how I'd classify myself, I mean, you got the same dilemma I have, and I'm gonna be talking about this endlessly until these cameras come out, because I haven't made a decision about what we're gonna do. But the best advice I can give right now is be cautious about it. Be aware of how you shoot video. If you need to shoot long dialogue scenes, like say this A-roll shot right now where I'm talking for a while, if I record this for a half hour, and I was doing it on the R6, then the camera would just be dead for a while. Like you gotta wait at least 20 minutes. In Gerald's tests, he was saying it's 2 hours for a full recovery before you can get back to regular record limits. That's a crazy limitation. That's a huge problem. But if you're only gathering like supplementary B-roll footage that are always in short bursts, shooting at 4K, 24, or maybe even 60, you can probably just use these cameras. They're really good. They're probably going to get you through the day. Keep in mind that as you shoot photos, that will reduce the amount of video time that you can shoot in these higher quality modes. If you're a video only shooter and you're considering these cameras, I've got very bad news that you probably saw coming. These are not the cameras you should buy. It's unfortunate. The price is great. The specs seem right on paper, but it's going to be a massive problem. And I would not walk into a production environment where, especially there's a client on set waiting for a camera to cool down. That can't happen. That can never happen. So they're not primary video cameras. And I think the idea of Canon marketing them as such is a lot of the reason people are so disappointed. Another detail I noticed after my review in there, I was talking about IPB versus all-I, and that you really can't see the difference of those two compression methods, where a lot of the conversation was about how you're making some kind of visual compromise by using the R6, which only shoots IPB, and using the R5, which can shoot IPB or all-I. If you don't even know these terms, it's just IPB is more compressed. It's like a motion compression, but it's very hard to see any difference. I mean, it just looks great. I don't worry about it. I shoot IPB all the time. Now, what's very interesting to me is as the A7S III was announced, that conversation shifted a lot, and it started being more about the time it would take to process those files on your computer, which is absolutely true. Those higher compression methods, any higher compression method that's more effective at shrinking down that file, is going to be slower for your computer to reopen those files back up, to undo the compression and play them back in an NLE. And as you start making big changes in your video editor, it will slow down more and more as those grades and titles or visual effects or whatever you add to it. The more it's compressed, the slower it's going to run on your machine. And that's especially true of H.265, which is being widely used in all of these new cameras, and it will really chug on certain computers. It'll just slow everything down to a grind. And somehow Sony marketing seemed to put what I think is the right spin on that message and say, look, like IPB is there, it's also going to look great, but it'll slow your machine down. Whereas Canon, just for some reason, I think what happened is they wanted to keep the R6 positioned enough below the R5 to justify the upgrade. So some people would look at it, which you guys said this in the comments, and you're like, oh, if it's IPB only, I can't use it. I need all-I. That's the only option that I'm going to use, so I need the R5. And that set the tone of the conversation about the R6 that like you're losing image quality. Whereas On the A7S III, it's all in the same camera, and people just were talking about it differently. Anyway, I just think it's an important thing to know about if you're making a decision based on these compression methods. So I think we've all got a lot to think about right now until these cameras are fully released in the fall. Hopefully they hit their shipping dates and they're not back ordered forever. I did cancel my pre-order for the R6 because I'm just very unsure. I gotta get my hands on one of those A7S IIIs. And if you guys wanna know more about all of this stuff, it's talked about on The Real Podcast. So just search for Stalman Podcast in your player of choice, wherever that is. And I'll talk to you guys over there. Thanks for watching.